As the coronavirus situation worsens, some organisations have responded to the virus. The Australian Construction Industry Forum has been attending roundtables with government ministers and released a statement calling for a collaborative and proactive approach to minimise the impact of COVID-19 on the construction industry. Civil Contractors Federation CEO Chris Melham has welcomed Prime Minister Scott Morrison's comments, urging the business community to pay suppliers promptly, but says that this needs to extend to government as well. He also expressed his concern about accessing raw materials such as cement coming out of Southeast Asia. CFMEU Secretary Dave Noonan said the industry should not unilaterally shut down and should instead manage worksites on a job-by-job basis. He has called for 2 weeks' pay for affected workers. Executive Director of the Australian Constructors Association, Lindsay Lecompte, said clients will need to consider giving some leeway to allow industry to meet its obligations. Rebecca Kazin, CEO of Master Builders Victoria, has urged levels of government to approve reasonable requests for extensions of time, even if contracts did not technically allow them. John Holland said its projects remained operational, but the group was working through a range of scenarios that may affect its people and projects. Mirvac released a statement saying that staff have been instructed to work from home, and Bunnings have cancelled all in-store activities and sausage sizzles. As Prime Minister Scott Morrison banned indoor gatherings of 100 people or more, the events industry fell victim to the virus. Whilst many of the forthcoming expos had already been put on ice, this now wipes out what will probably be the whole 2020 events calendar. Australia's biggest construction events and expos have now unanimously been postponed. Sydney Build Expo and the Australian Construction Awards was supposed to be held this weekend, but have been postponed to February next year. Design Build in Melbourne appears optimistic about the length of this crisis, rescheduling the event for October this year. All remaining Australian Building Codes Board National Construction Code seminars have been postponed, along with all Australian Institute of Architects events. The Green Building Council of Australia's Transform event, which is scheduled for March 24 and 25, will go ahead as an online conference, whilst Fire Australia 2020 has been cancelled altogether. Prime Minister Scott Morrison said the coronavirus outbreak could have a greater impact on Australia's fortunes than the global financial crisis. To help minimise the impact, the federal government has released a $17.6 billion stimulus package, including $1.3 billion in payments to small businesses to cover half the wages of apprentices. Businesses with less than 20 employees will receive $7,000 per quarter, backdated from the start of the year until the end of September, to cover half the wages of their apprentices. At state level, New South Wales has announced $2.3 billion in fiscal stimulus, with more than $250 million dedicated to fast-track maintenance on public assets, including social housing and Crown-led fencing, as well as $500 million to bring forward capital works and maintenance. South Australia unveiled a $350 million package, which is primarily targeted at bringing forward tourism and infrastructure projects. Northern Territory announced a $60 million property renovation scheme, including grants of up to $6,000 for individuals and $20,000 for businesses. But will the stimulus help? Companies are facing the prospect of having to close their doors and shut down sites to stop the spread. If that's the case, then by the time companies pay overheads, rents and wages, $25,000 cash handouts will go down without barely touching the sides. Much the same, the tax incentives won't help those businesses that can't continue to operate. The airline industry has been the first to suffer, but it won't be the last. The stimulus is great, but it won't do much to keep people in jobs and avoid a recession if everyone is quarantined. At an industry roundtable held last week, Prime Minister Scott Morrison said the biggest risk to the industry was no longer our dependence on China, but our own workforce. Travel restrictions, quarantine laws, Social distancing and workers' fear of infection are likely to impact the availability of workers in what may be a supply-side disaster for the industry. If workers on site become sick, whole sites may need to be shut down. The real risk here is that even government infrastructure projects designed to inject money into the economy may come to a standstill. CFMEU Secretary Dave Noonan said he was aware of one site that had to shut down because of the virus. Whilst the government's new ban on indoor gatherings of 100 people does not apply to construction sites, it is possible that this may eventuate in the not too distant future. Australian Construction Industry Forum CEO James Cameron said the construction industry labour force is highly integrated, and one missing link can mean that projects cannot continue. In the United States, Boston and the San Francisco Bay Area have shut down all their construction sites, which may be a sign of what's to come in Australia. John Holland CEO Joe Barr this week told the Australian Financial Review that the construction industry is on the brink of collapse after reporting a $59.6 million annual loss. According to Mr. Barr, Tier 1 contractors are not making any money due to risky projects and cost blowouts in some of Australia's biggest infrastructure projects, such as Westgate Tunnel and Sydney Metro. CIMIC, who along with John Holland is being impacted by the unresolved Westgate Tunnel dispute, recently reported an annual loss of $1 billion. Lendlease, John Holland's partner on the Melbourne Metro, is being hurt by the cost blowouts on the project and has announced they are expecting total group losses in the order of $500 million. Mr. Barr said John Holland will no longer bid on risky projects. Recently, Downer EDI also announced they will step away from riskier jobs such as solar, coal and iron ore projects. Many small to mid-sized contractors and developers have recently collapsed, owing millions of dollars, including Verve Construction, Rayland Group, Stella Group, Vaughan Constructions and Banyan Constructions. Construction-related insolvencies reached 1,700 companies in 2019, a 3.5-year high. Brad Walters, the head of product and rating services at data company Equifax, said this trend is likely to continue. The impending risk posed by COVID-19 to losing cash flow will not bode well for contractors that are already struggling to hold their head above water. As workers across the country fear for their jobs, consumer confidence will take a hit. Experts say that the interest rate cuts won't be enough to avoid the impact of the country being locked down. Housing demand will soften and developers will find it difficult to access finance. Sectors that construction relies on, such as education, hotels and transport, are likely to delay capital projects to protect cash flow. As work dries up, competition for jobs will increase, lowering profit margins for contractors as they try to continue operating. Unfortunately, all this points to more construction-related insolvencies and the possible collapse of the construction sector in Australia.